Hello, Craig here with another MFA Advanced training. In this training, I'm going to cover the rent roll import mapping. This step is entirely optional, although I think there are a lot of benefits in doing so, which I'll show you later. It is also important to note that this is one of the more difficult things for setting up the model. I have a lot of tools to help with that process, but rent rolls come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, and sometimes getting that into the right format can be challenging. So with that, I will show you the process. We'll go to the rent roll import tab. On this tab, it's broken up into three sections, which is the mapping and data quality check. This is essentially your guide for mapping the rent roll. You really want to work top to bottom in this rent roll mapping all the fields. The fields in red are required if you want to use the rent roll data in your underwriting. The fields in black are nice. They support the dashboard in the rent roll summary. And then the very last thing to be mapped, and this is very important, is the unit number. We'll talk about that in a little bit. The second section is the unit type mapping. This section helps you map your unit types to bedrooms and bathrooms and designate it as renovated. Bedroom and bathroom is required for the underwriting model. And then it also automatically creates a unit name so that it's very clear what the unit name is, and you can overwrite that if you choose. This name will be used throughout the underwriting model. And then the last section is the rent roll mapping table. Here is where you paste in your rent roll, and then you map your unit column or rent roll columns up here. And with that, we'll go ahead and start the process. Since this already has a rent roll in it, I'm going to clear the rent roll data. I'll go ahead and click yes. And the instructions are laid out here on the left. You see 1, 2, 3, 4. It's pretty straightforward. So now I need to go get my rent roll and paste it in. And I'm going to go into my rent roll formatter. I'm going to select cell E1 and it will paste my rent roll into the formatter. I have a video on how to use the rent roll formatter, so watch that. I'm not going to go into detail, but I just want to show you how it's going to clean up this format. So click modify rent roll. Already put in all my inputs. And then it kicks out a nicely formatted rent roll. And it does require a couple additional steps for cleaning it up because this rent roll had 2 header columns. It has this row that's useless. So I'm going to delete the rows that I don't need. So I've already fixed this. The other thing I'll mention is it's really nice to have a move-in date, lease expiration, as well as a lease start date. This rent roll does not have a lease start, and it's not required, but I like to add it because it helps round out the dashboard. So I'm just going to use move-in date for lease start. So I will copy that, insert copied cells, and I'll just put this as lease start. And then I'm going to delete this additional row. And now the rent roll data is ready to import into the underwriting model. I will highlight all the data, copy it, and go into the underwriting model, put my cursor right here in that very first empty cell. And then what I'll do is I'll just paste. And now begins the mapping process. And again, I will map all the fields as they're outlined in this mapping check table, starting from the top, working my way to the bottom. So first thing is unit type. And you'll notice as I map a field, it disappears from the pick list. So now you'll notice unit type is no longer in here. I'll map square footage. Tenant name. So I use the tenant name field to identify vacant units. So I'll map tenant name. It's really important that this value, vacant, gets input into the term used to identify vacant units. And then also I notice that we have a model unit down here. We'll go ahead and make sure that model unit, we put the value in right there. So let's go ahead and do that while I'm thinking about it. And I will go ahead. It's exactly the way you see it in the rent roll. And now we'll continue mapping. So here is my market rent. And then we have our move-in date. Then lease start, which again, I just copied the move-in date column, added it, renamed it to lease start, and then lease expiration. And then if we look at our, oh, I forgot my in-place rent. So this is great for the checklist. I gotta go back over here. I gotta find my in-place rent. That's probably one of these new columns, or a lot of new columns, and it is right here. In this rent roll, they labeled the rent column as RNT, but I know that that is my in-place rent. Now I'll go look at my checklist. I see that we've mapped everything in the rent roll table up to this part. And now we got to use this unit type mapping table to map the balance of the fields. So oftentimes the unit type here corresponds exactly with the unit mix in the offering memory. So let's go grab that. Now I'll paste it right here so I could just see the corresponding unit types. And now I just fill out the section. So I see 65 units. See, this matches exactly 65 units. We can go ahead and use this as our guide for mapping bedrooms and bathrooms. So we have one bedroom, one bath. Next one is one bedroom, bath, but these are the renovated. So here I will designate it as renovated, and we'll just continue the process. Everything is mapped. Delete that. Very last step is to map our unit number. So as soon as we map this unit number, all the data gets aggregated and it gets summarized into our rent roll summary. So that is why this is the last step. I want to pause here and make a note. Sometimes when you map your unit type mappings here, you're going to see that there are more than 15 unit names. It's very important that the model has 15 or fewer unit names. It's only designed to handle 15 or fewer. So if you have more, you need to come up with a way to limit that or aggregate. The easiest way is really removing square footage from the name, and then it will aggregate based on bedrooms and bathrooms. So I recommend if you have 15 or more than 15 unit names, check this box. This will solve it. What this will do is aggregate all your one bedrooms and one bathrooms based on the bedroom, bath, and the renovation status. And you could still do a very decent job underwriting, even if you aggregate your unit types. Okay, so that is it. We're all mapped. Now, the last thing, as I mentioned, we're going to go ahead and map the unit number. That is the last field. And you see, it wasn't available before, but now it is because we have all of our bedrooms and our unit names mapped. We can map unit number. So our rent roll is completely mapped. Now we can go to the rent roll summary tab, and we can see our summary data right here. So it corresponds exactly with the unit type names that we just mapped. It aggregates all the in-place rents. It removes vacancy from in-place rents based on our vacancy fields. And then it has our market rent, has all the leases signed in the last 30 days, all the leases signed in the last 60, last 90, min-max, vacancy by unit type, 1 year turnover. All very useful information. There is one more step before this dashboard is completely updated, and that is we have to click the refresh data button. This ensures that all the data that we just mapped is refreshed throughout the dashboard. So we'll go ahead and click that. And you can see the last refresh date. So if you're ever in question, you can see the last time you refreshed it. Okay, now let's take a look at the dashboard. Some really nice high-level KPIs up here on the right. We can see that we have 83 renovated units. That's 34% of the mix. Vacancy is very low, 3.7. Monthly loss to lease. We have 14 expired leases. So we have 14 leases that are beyond the expiration date, but we still have tenants there. So they may be on a month-to-month lease. This is something to investigate. That might be the low-hanging fruit for a renovation, or at least where you start. Going down, we have a lot of graphs. Initial graphs are really by unit type. I really like this graph because this shows us by unit type how many units we have, what our in-place rent is, what our loss to lease is by unit, and then our total market rent for every unit type, and then the total on the right. Very easy to see how your property is performing here. 1 year turnover by unit type. Typically, I would expect to see if they're renovating units, if they're actively renovating units, turnover is probably going to be higher for those renovated units. Moving down, we have our trended graphs. These are really helpful to see the overall trend. Right now it's filtered for the total property, but you can filter by unit type and see all of this data for each of the unit types that you have mapped. Very helpful for seeing the performance for the different 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, renovated, non-renovated. We're just going to focus on the total right now. Lease expirations by month, you can see we have a lot of expirations happening in August. And then it dips off towards the end of the year. Something to keep track of if you're trying to plan a renovation. Lease trend by start. This is my favorite graph. This graph is especially useful if we have a lease, an actual lease start date in the data. But you can see the overall number of leases signed and the trend on the rent. And hopefully this trend line right here is up the right. I have been seeing a lot more rent rolls where it's starting to go down. So something to look at it by unit type. It's very useful. And then just a couple graphs to showcase the overall age of leases here. So we have quite a few leases, 55 that are 2 years or older. And then tenancy duration. How long have the tenants lived at your property? Okay. So if you're satisfied with this data, and this is the level of detail that you want to do the rest of your renovation and underwriting analysis at, satisfied with this, you can import it directly into the underwriting model by clicking the populate unit mix button right here. What this does is it loads your unit mix table in the underwriting model with data directly from the rent roll. So we're going to go ahead and do that real quick. You get an error, a warning, and go ahead and click yes. It means that any data that's in the rent roll unit mix table will be overwritten. There you go. So you can see that this data right here is exactly what was in the rent roll summary. So we'll just walk through this real quick. The other thing I want to mention is all the rent roll indicators. If you map your rent roll, you're going to have those indicators off to the right here. I'll just turn this on, and then you can see this is very useful for setting your rent strategy. So what I'll typically do is I'll look at the current market rent, 973. I notice we signed 10 leases in the last 30 days at 915. So maybe this market rent should be a little bit lower. So it's up to you to determine how you want to set your market rents. This really impacts your gross potential rent in the model, as well as your rent premium that determines your post-renovation rent. So spend some time here analyzing the rent trends, the lease trade-outs to set your market rent. It's loaded initially from the rent roll. So this is whatever property management company has set market rent to, but it's your job to go through and validate that it's accurate. That is it for this video. If you have any questions or need any help, feel free to reach out to me. This is a pretty common format. It's a very difficult format to analyze because it has one unit number here and multiple rows of data that are associated to that unit number. This does not work in the underwriting model. So we have to format this. And the underwriting model requires one header row, which essentially is this row, the top, and then one row for each unit number. So in order to format this, we can use the rent roll formatter. So I'm going to go ahead, copy my rent roll, and then I will go to the rent roll formatter. There's a separate video on how to use this. This tool is included in the MFA Advanced subscription. It's also available individually for purchase. I'm going to paste in my rent roll. And then I've already completed these inputs. I'll click modify rent roll. And what this does is it gave me one unit type or one unit number for every row. And then since this has a couple additional rows at the top, I would just very quickly modify this just so I know what these, because I'm going to delete the other rows. I want to make sure that I know what they are. And you see my rent column is over here in the underwrite or in the rent roll. It was labeled RNT. So I'm just going to that. And then I think I'm good. Go ahead and delete this. Now my rent roll is ready to get pasted in. One thing I noticed in this rent roll, so there are 3 dates that are really important for the dashboard, and it's a move-in date, a lease expiration date, but also some rent rolls have a lease start date. So move-in is when the tenant moved in, and a lease start is when the latest lease was renewed or started. So this one does not have a lease start. So in order to get all 3 dates, what I'll do is I'll just replicate the move-in and I'll just call it start. And I just do this, it's not required. I do it because I want the dashboard to work. And I want to be able to see the trend of leases over time. So now that I have this, I would just copy my data, go back to my underwriting model, and I'll paste it in. Okay. All right, and then I just start mapping. You see the list here, I'll just map unit type. And you'll notice as I map, unit type is no longer available in the pick list. So as soon as I map a column, it is removed from the pick list, so square footage. So here, name, I'm going to map name, tenant name, and the model uses tenant name to identify vacancy. So you can see I have vacant right here, and I have model. So what I want to do is I want to put those values in these cells over here. So I want to make sure that they are identical. So right here, I will go ahead and type in just like it's spelled there. And then I'll just go ahead and put model. So this tells the underwriting model which fields are used to identify a vacancy. Okay, so moving on, I'm going to mark my market rent. So rent market. We have a move-in date here. So I'm just going to move in. Remember, I replicated the move-in date for a lease start date just for my dashboard. And then lease expiration, lease end, and then we need our rent. So our rent column ended up over here, and I'm going to mark that as rent. Occupancy is optional. Like I said, the model right now, the way I have it mapped, is tenant name is used to identify the vacant units. If it had an occupancy column, you could map that. If you end up mapping tenant name and occupancy, the model uses occupancy over tenant name to identify vacant units. So just keep that in mind. And so now what I do, this is all mapped. Next thing is bed, bath, and unit. So that all happens in this table, right? Okay, so what you can use to map the unit type, the bedroom and bathroom, is oftentimes the offering memorandum provided by your broker will be identical to this, except it'll have more meaningful descriptions like 3-bedroom, 2-bath. This one's pretty easy because we can see that in here we have 1-bedroom, 1-bath. We have a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 2-bath with an R on the end, which designates it as renovated. So I'm just going to use the logic that's already in the unit type to fill this table out. Okay, now that that's all filled out, I received a warning. So the model can only support 15 unique unit names. It looks like we have 16 right now. But what we have to do is we have to adjust the name in some way so that we have 15 or fewer unique unit names. And so one of the easiest ways to do this is to remove square footage from the name. So we can play around with this to see what we want to remove. So all we do is just uncheck that box, and then you'll see that it removes square footage from the name. Now we have 6 unique unit names. Now if we go back and we find that we need the additional detail, there are other things that we can do to help with the unique unit name count. But for the sake of this example, we're going to go ahead and leave it right here. So now I have 6 unique unit names. And now that if I look back over at my mapping check, you can see everything is mapped except for that very last field, which is unit number. And I map this over in the rent roll table. And I look into the rent roll table and I can see there's my unit number right there. And I just need to map this, you'll see unit number available. And that is it. So now my rent roll is completely mapped. And if you want to see the output of this, you just click on the summary, the rent roll summary tab. And you can see this is the rent roll summary that it prepared based on our mapping. And this looks pretty good. Has 6 unit names, just broken out by 1 bedroom, 1 bath, and then renovated, 2 bedroom, etc. And now I can do kind of a detailed analysis of my 1 bedrooms versus my renovated units, etc. When you aggregate all those unit types into a higher level unit type name, it's going to average all the square footage. It's going to add up all the units for all the 1 bedroom, and then it averages all the rent for all the 1 bedrooms. So it's accurate whether you break it out or you aggregate it. The other thing to mention is on this summary tab, you need to make sure to click the refresh data, because right now the entire dashboard is not updated until you click that button after the mapping of the rent roll. I'll go ahead and click the button and it refreshes my entire dashboard. So now I can kind of look through my dashboard and get some really great information. And this is really one of the benefits of mapping your rent roll, is it does the analysis for you. You can see I have 42 renovated units. That's about 31% of my mix is renovated. I'm at almost a 10% vacancy. My monthly loss to lease is about 11,000, about 12,000 actually. And I have 2 expired leases. This is important because this means that you have tenants whose leases have expired. Really important to keep track of if you're planning a renovation strategy. These might be month-to-month leases that might be the low-hanging fruit for a renovation, so something to keep track of. And then we got a lot of graphs down below. So unit mix, this graph is really nice because it shows you by unit type what your in-place rent is, and then the delta right here. This might be a better example. In-place rent, your delta, which is your delta to market rent, and then your total market rent. So in properties where you see a large delta, that means you have a pretty large loss to lease. Like this 3 bedroom has about a $200 loss to lease. And then across the bottom, these are how many units for each unit type. So we don't have a lot of these 3 bedroom units. We have 3 that are renovated, 3 that are renovated with a $200 loss lease. So it's not a large weight of the overall loss lease number on this property. Okay, so moving on, we have 1-year turnover on the right. I would expect to see a much higher turnover on these renovated units. Likely they're taking them down to renovate, put them back on. So that's why you see a higher renovation. Nothing to worry about there. And then if we go down, we can see that I have some trended graphs and down below. This is really helpful. Right now we're looking across the entire property. So this is helpful because we can see we have a lot of lease expirations coming up this summer. So if we plan to close on this property before that, there may be an opportunity to renovate here. We have a lot fewer around December time. So it's really important to understand your lease expirations because it will have an impact on your renovation strategy. And then this is one of my favorite graphs is the rent trend by lease start. Again, we mapped move-in date as lease start. But if we had a true lease start, it would be a much shorter time frame, usually a year or slightly longer. And you can see very clearly the trend in all the new leases and see if the rent is trending up or down. Really nice. And then a couple graphs below just to show you the current lease age. So we have 20% of the units are 2 years or older. And then tenancy duration. So typically you expect turnover in an apartment, and you can see we have a couple people that have been there 7 or 8 years, between 7 and 8 years. The last thing I'll mention is you have the ability to filter this trended section on the left by the unit type that you mapped. So this is really nice because I could kind of go through each of the unit types and see what's happening, see where the lease expirations are, renovated. See, we signed a lease that's much lower over here. Signed a lease quite a bit lower than what we were signing in September. This is an old rent roll, but and so you can keep going through each of the unit types to see what's going on, kind of the performance at this more lower level of detail. See if the renovated units are getting the rents. Okay, that's it for mapping the rent roll. The last step in the process, if you choose to use this data right here for the rest of your analysis in your underwriting file, you can click the Populate Unit Mix button. And what this does, it will take the data and it'll put it directly into your underwriting model. So we'll go ahead and do that real quick just so you can see how that works. Just going to click Populate Unit Mix. It's going to give you a warning. It says any of the data that's in your Unit Mix tab will be lost. Like, okay with that? Click OK. It's going to move everything over into this Unit Mix table. Okay, updated. And you can see again, this data right here is exactly what we were looking at in the rent roll summary tab. So this makes your job a little bit easier so that now all you got to do is you just focus on validating your market rents. Are these accurate? And then planning out your renovation strategy in your rent. So this is a huge benefit for mapping the rent roll, is that you get this data automatically populated for you. The other benefit here is if I scroll to the right, all those rent roll indicators, I turn them on, and I can see that. So as I plan out my market rent, 1585 for this one bedroom, I can see they have been closing leases above 1585. 1650, that total 4 leases that averaged 1650 in the last 90 days. So maybe this 1585 is too low for market rent. And then if we look across the renovated one bedroom, rents are lower. That's not a good sign. There might be a mix issue I would evaluate in the rent roll. That is it. Thank you for watching.